Welcome to 1001 Ways to Cope with Stress. I am Professor Kinshasha Shabaka, and we are now having Dr. Frederick Munderson, our noted historian, publisher, and just an Egyptologist, so many descriptive terms for him, do part two of our conclusion of the place of creation called the House of Life, as he talks about the Temple of Karnak in Egypt. We thank you again, Doctor.
Well, thank you very much for having me again, and we're trying to conclude the second part of the summary of Karnak Temple as we've unfolded over the last 6 weeks or so. So in the last session, I mentioned the 5 creator gods: Ra at Heliopolis, Ptah at Memphis, Thoth at Hermopolis, Khnum at, Amun at Karnak, and Khnum at Aswan. He makes man his partner. Amun is the one who is unknown, but who supplies the one thing that creates the creation. That is the breath of life. That is blown into the nostrils of man. This breath is the difference between life and not life. It symbolizes the vital force, the Ka. So first and foremost, we must recognize that these 5 creator gods are not competing doctrines, contradictory deities, but representative of the true greatness of the African spirit and the African creativity, intellectualism. Thus, Karnak, which we're focusing on, besides being a religious center, was an intellectual hub, a place of learning, science, medicine, a house of life. Here scholars congregated. The center possessed a library. We know of Alexandria, where the Greeks got their wisdom, but the libraries at Karnak, Luxor, Museum, Medinet Habu were exceptional and have been in existence longer than the library at Alexandria. We know mathematical papyri were found and discovered at the Museum. Some of it is in Europe today. These Africans taught the cardinal virtues, which were generally delivered in maxims, learning, caveats, if you will. But what is a maxim? This was explained by Obenga, Theophile Obenga. We mentioned him before, Dr. Diop's associate. He says, an Egyptian maxim, in effect, is a veritable ritual performance. It should be sequenced intellectually so as to lead necessarily to knowledge, culture, moral rectitude, good conduct, and the setting of a good example. In sum, its aim is moral, ethical, methodical, and artistic. The highest value in these maxims is placed on a constant quest for truth and justice. Great is justice. Justice is same as righteousness. In essence, really marked as manifest equates with righteousness, justice, and truth. This creates moral, social, and spiritual purity. We gotta go deep on this here now.
It sounds
in the philosophy of Pharaonic Egypt, Maat is a concept of central importance. It implies order, universal balance, cosmic regulation, justice, truth in justice, rectitude, and moral uprightness. The concept of balanced order is the permanent basis of Pharaonic civilization. Balanced order brings peace. It condemns crime and evil. Whoever breaks the law is punished, irrespective. The social order secretes benevolence and loving kindness without stifling personal initiative and work. That is to say, Maat castigates slander, lying, defamation, boastfulness, and flattery. Summing up,
I love it. I love it.
We have three. We actually
Freudian slip.
We have 4 books on Obama, so it's not altogether out of the ordinary. So the concept of math is complex. It is multi-layered. To understand it, we examine it on 3 levels. On the universal level, the concept of math expresses the harmony of the elements as clearly established, each in its own right place. This is the concept of an ordered whole, an ordered cosmos, an ordered world. On the political level, the concept of math works against injustice. It is the name of math that the Pharaoh. It is in the name of math that the Pharaoh subjugates the enemies of Egypt. On the individual level, which brings out the best in you, math embraces specific rules for living in concert with moral principles. Whoever lives according to these rules and principles achieves order in his or her life. In practical terms, and lives in harmony with the ordered whole, the whole universe. You live in harmony. If you live in disharmony with the universe, then something terrible is happening. The most accomplished, useful, and appropriate human action is circumscribed in the cosmological order, as symbolized by the way of the Pharaoh's name, how it's written. Now, these cardinal virtues we talk about shape human behavior. Though the Greeks sought to get credit for these ideas, they were first taught in Egyptian schools. They were created within the mind of the African. Places of higher learning, such as Karnak, even a museum, were considered mysteries to the uninitiated. This barbarian coming in thought of these things as mysteries, but for the initiated, there were ordered principles in the school system that we were a part of. They taught temperance. Temperance is complete control of the passional nature of self-mastery, fortitude, courage to combat adversity and accomplish your goals, prudence, deep insights that benefit the faculty of seership, justice, unswerving righteousness of thought and action. So this leads to control of thought, control of action, control of steadfastness of purpose, identification with spiritual life and higher or metaphysical or esoteric training, evidence of having a mission or a purpose in life, freedom from resentment, call to spiritual mission as a priest, confidence in the power of the master, confidence in one's ability to learn, and readiness or preparedness for initiation. So the vessel has to be clean and ready for the ointment or whatever is to be inserted.
Preach, doctor.
While Pythagoras articulated a system of doctrines that his disciples followed, the Africans taught the laws of opposites, harmony, fire, mind, and immorality. Even the sonum bonum, which is the highest good, which is what each and every one of us optimizes to be able to bring into being. George G.M. James, in his book Soul and Legacy, speaks of the soul of man, which has 5 different dimensions: the sensitive, the rational, the nutritive, the appetitive, and the locomotion. The sensitive is being able to feel and commiserate with people, things, and what have you. The rational, how to think. Nutritive, to be able to ingest food, drink, what have you. Appetitive, being to appreciate what you would eat. And locomotive, to be able to move back and forth from one place to the other. In his book, Stone Legacy, written in 1954 in New York Philosophical Library, he spoke about the Book of the Dead, which the Book of the Dead is an evolution of the pyramid texts of the Old Kingdom, the coffin text of the Middle Kingdom, and the Book of the Dead of the New Kingdom, which its actual name is the Book of Going Forth by Day. That is to say, having lived the life and survived the judgment, to be able to move about in heaven because you've lived a good life based on Mark. So the Book of the Dead identifies 9 inseparable parts of the soul. This is the Ka, and I'm going to go through them very quickly. The Ka, the Kat, the Ba, the Ab, the Kebet, the Ku, the Sahu, the Sekhem, and the Ren. Now, the ka is the abstract personality of the man to whom it belongs, possessing the form and attributes of a man with power of locomotion, omnipresent, being able to go anywhere, and ability to receive nourishment like a man. It is equivalent to his image. The cat, the concrete personality, the physical body which is mortal, can be killed. Ba, the heart soul which dwells in the ka and sometimes alongside it. In order to supply it with air and food, it has the power of metamorphosis or ability to change its will, its form at will. The ab is the heart, the animal life in man that is rational, spiritual, and ethical. It is associated with the ba or the heart soul, and in the Egyptian drama, judgment drama, it undergoes examination in the presence of Osiris. It is believed that your heart must be as light as a feather for you to be survive in the night. The thing that you do can, in a way, weigh your heart down. And I robbed this man, I killed this, I did this, these things. That's why we have the negative confessions to say that when you stand there in front of your God at the time of judgment, you have to be able to boast, I did not do this, 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 42 times. But there were also some positive confessions say, well, listen, I did this. Listen, I gave bread to the widow. I helped the hungry. I gave a coat to this guy in the cold. He was shivering. The good things that
Absolutely.
you did.
Sure.
The kabit, it is associated with the bar, the heart soul, from which, like the ka, it receives its nourishment. The ku, the spiritual soul, which is immortal. It lives forever. The sahu, the spiritual body in which the ku or spiritual soul dwells. It is all the mental and spiritual attributes of the natural body that are united in new powers of its own. The sekam, the power of the spiritual personification of the vital force in a man. Its dwelling place is in the heavens with the spirits, with the kus, with the gods. And the ren. The Egyptians believe, the ren is the name, the Egyptians believed that the name was the most essential part of the human personality, that if you didn't have a name, you didn't exist. Now, if you go into the cemetery and you see all these headstones, each one of them has a name, and you see that grave over there with no name, you don't know who's it. It didn't really exist because you couldn't say, you don't know who that is. So the name was an essential part.
Mm-hmm.
Even further, James continues, the soul has 9 parts whose unity is so complete that even the ren, the name, is an essential attribute, since without it, it cannot exist. The ba or heart soul is connected with the ka, the kabit, and the ab, and also with the ku and the sekim. The sashu is a spiritual body which is used both by the ku and the sekim. And he talks about the kat, which is the physical body, is essential to the soul while manifesting itself upon the physical plane. And then he talks again about the soul has the additional spiritual or physical attributes. Omnipresence, that is to say, capable of being in all places at the same time. Metamorphosis, change of form, structure, substance, function, or character. Locomotion, the power to move from one place to another. This is the soul. It goes around. Nutritive, capable of ingesting food or nourishment. Mortality has to do with dying, death, and extinction. Immortality, having to live forever. Rationality, possessing the ability to act and think rationally. And spirituality, behavior relative to the spirit or to the soul. Morality, right or moral conduct as related to behavior. Ethereal, not earthly, heavenly, celestial is up there. A shadowy, having the ability to cast a shadow. We all have our shadows. Even Pausatili Phil. You remember the Pausatili Phil that shows up and they look for his what is it? What animal is it? I can't remember.
I can't remember.
But he predicts if they see his shadow, he predicts we have some winter for next 6 weeks.
Right. Groundhog.
Hence, groundhog. Okay. Aristotle obtained the doctrine of the soul from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, directly or indirectly, is what James concludes. But this thievery and misappropriation, omission, distortion is being seriously challenged today by vigorous Afrocentric research. Notwithstanding, at the root of all intellectual activity stood Mart, the social excellence that regulated human social behavior on earth to influence afterlife existence. So what you do here, despite what people may think, what you do here, according to that belief, these African belief system, life on earth was temporary, but eternal life was forever. And you wanted to have, you may have it good over here, but bad over there. If you have it challenged over here, you want to have it good over there. So you live according with an eye to the future that your behavior will guarantee that at the appropriate time, you will not die the second death. It is one thing to die and then to be judged in the afterlife and then to be cast out because you didn't live. You didn't, you know. When the poor man asks you for a shilling, you say, sorry, buddy, my pocket is full, laden, but I can't help you. You can't do that. The ancient Egyptians, according to Obenga, relative to the negative and the positive confessions, which is what you undergo as you stood before your God in the heavenly abode, hall of justice, with the 42 judges who determine whether you should live forever. Ancient Egypt recognized morality as law. Rules of behavior and moral conduct were codified so that words attributed to the deceased constitute discourses of applied morality by whose criteria individuals evaluated their own deeds freely accomplished while they live on earth. Saying, I am pure, I am pure, I am pure, Obenga continued, as a pure being, the deceased individual deserved to escape condemnation on the scale of justice. The ancient Egyptians believed they were kings, whether they were kings or ordinary persons, that they lived under the imprint of Ma'at, justice and truth, the one way to true happiness, peace, beauty, and intelligent life. Hence, the use of solar light as a symbol of Ma'at. Remember we talked about solar life, the glow from the sun, and so forth and so on. Now, on a more philosophical, spiritual, esoteric note, the car, everyone is taught to have one car. Queen Hatshepsut said, I have 12. Ra, the god, sun god, had 14. Ramses II, he was bold. He said, I have 30. But what was the car that Ra possessed, the 14 cars? It's creative utterance, abundance, wealth, service, making food, preparation, magic, freshness, sparkle, victory, influence, brightness, gleam, honor, and preparedness. There's nothing like preparedness for wherever you're going, whether above or below. Hence, we know that Karnak was a special place, a place of tremendous significance, religious, spiritual, theological. The seat of the all-God, the place of the first occasion, where the 15-member triad, Enid, resided. Either they had a temple there or they visited. So it was called the palaces where the gods were welcome. A place of life, a medical school, a place of learning, high intellectual activity transpired there, where craftsmanship excelled and abounded. The holiest place in all of Egypt for nearly 2 millennia, 2,000 years. That is why Dr. Ben encouraged his students to visit Karnak, visit the Hypostyle Hall 5 or 6 times. Be on your best behavior in the temple, and don't enter the sanctuary, and, because only in the ancient times, only the king or the high priest could enter the place where the god resided. I mean, there is a difference between the general temple and the actual room or sanctuary where the god was. And no matter how big a noble may have been, there's only a certain area in the temple that he can enter. You come through the pylon, and you're in the great court. You'll be invited into the temple, into the great court, or what have you. And beyond the great court would be the hypostyle hall, where generally the processions take place and whatever, and even behind. But these nobles, no matter how high they weren't admitted into the hypostyle hall. Only some of the high priests, or the high priest and some of his more immediate associates. And then behind that is where the god resided. In Karnak, it's called the Wajit. All right, let's say the 20, 25 feet towards the sanctuary. Only the king went in there. So you, Dr. Bennett, say, be on your best behavior. Don't go in there. Because in ancient times, you couldn't go in there. He said, don't enter the sanctuary and learn from the religious architecture, art, science, and storehouse of knowledge this holy place represented. This site of creation, talk about creation, in Northeast Africa, where he had a book called, working with with Professor Simmons. It was called The Black Man's North and East Africa, where he showed how the Europeans had mischaracterized the African. Dr. Carruthers said that Hegel took Egypt out of Africa, took Africans out of Egypt, and then took Egypt out of Africa.
Wow.
But we have to restore this balance.
To their rightful place.
We have to educate our people, and so that they will be armed to move forward. If you look at our contemporary situation, Professor Clark said, when I look for us in the us, we're not there.
Yes.
And we're not there because we're not properly armed with the intellectual fortitude that our ancestors bequeathed to us. So we must know our history, we must learn our history, and we must teach our children our history. No one can teach our history but ourselves. Dr. Clark again said, African people must write African history. And that's what we're trying to do. And I have to commend Sister Shabaka, because she is encouraging the dissemination of truth, and equally so justice, righteousness, and man. Sister, I want to thank you very much.
I want to thank you very much. And I want to thank you for listening to 1001 Ways to Cope with Stress. Dr. Munderson has given us a gift that we can impart to our children, and by all means partake of ourselves, because as he suggests and as he has so well demonstrated, if we know who we are, there is no way that we could act in the way that some of us do, because we have been so subtracted from the wealth of our history. I thank you, Doctor.
And I thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching.